Thrill of the Romance was an American romance film released by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in 1945, starring Van Johnson, Esther Williams and Carleton G.Young, with musical performances by opera singer Lauritz Melchior. The film was directed by Richard Thorpe and written by Richard Connell and Gladys Lehman. The film tells the story of Cynthia Glenn, who, after a whirlwind romance, marries a rich businessman. However, on the first day of the honeymoon, her new husband is called away to Washington, leaving her alone at a resort. During this time, she meets and falls in love with a war hero, Tommy Milvan, played by Van Johnson. This was the second of 5 films that paired Williams and Johnson together, made over a period of 8 years. Those that followed were Easy to Wed, Duchesses of Idaho and Easy to Love. Thrill of the Romance was a box office success, becoming the 8th highest-grossing film of 1945. Plot: Cynthia Glenn is a swimming instructor in Los Angeles, California, where she lives with her scatterbrained aunt and uncle Nona and Hobart. While demonstrating a dive to her students, she catches the eye of an interested stranger, Bob Delbar. Cynthia returns home to find that she has received flowers from the stranger. The two court for 1 month, and then get married. They leave immediately after the wedding on the honeymoon to the Hotel Montebello, where they encounter the famous opera singer, Nils Knussen. Major Thomas Milvan, who is also staying at the hotel, notices Cynthia. J.P. Bancroft, a rich colleague, calls Bob and insists that he come to Washington to complete a deal. While Cynthia cries over Bob's departure, Tommy, who is staying next door, comforts her. The next day, Cynthia ventures down to the pool, where she and J.P. Bancroft's daughter, Maud, speculate as to which hotel guest is Major Thomas Milvan, the decorated war hero, who shot down 16, or was it 26 warplanes, and was stuck on a deserted island for a month. After Maud teases Cynthia about being at the hotel without her husband on her vacation, Cynthia performs an elaborate dive and swims around the pool, where she proceeds to run into Major Milvan himself, who can't actually swim, so she teaches him how. For the rest of the week, Cynthia and Tommy continue accompanying each other to dinner and other activities around the hotel, including swimming. On the last day, Cynthia receives a telegram from Bob informing her that he will not be able to come back to the hotel for another week. However, Tommy is leaving the next morning, and Cynthia is distraught, so she retires to her room. Tommy realizes he loves her, rushes to their adjoining balcony, confesses his love for her and tells her that he is planning on staying for another week. However, Cynthia reiterates that she's a married woman, therefore, she won't let him hop over the hedge separating the 2 balconies and make love to her. She calls Bob in Washington and begs him to return, but he tells her that he can't. Cynthia looks for Tommy the next morning, but is told that he has checked out the hotel after the conversation the previous night, so she goes for a walk on her own on the Sunset Trail. Tommy returns to the hotel, learns where Cynthia has gone, and sets off after her on the trail. Meanwhile, Bob telephones the hotel and leaves a message indicating that he will be arriving the following morning. Tommy finds Cynthia and they proceed to walk together until they come across a tree with initials engraved on it. Cynthia tells Tommy that she loves him as well, but wants to give her marriage to Bob a chance, and lets him know that once they get back to the hotel, they should say their goodbyes and never see each other again. However, on the return trip, they lose the way and are forced to spend the night in the woods. The next morning, Bob arrives and finds that his wife isn't anywhere in the hotel. When they do return, Tommy tries to explain the disappearance. While Bob realizes that the two are in love, he becomes angry with Cynthia and announces he wants an annulment after Cynthia admits that she fell in love with Tommy. Bob calls his lawyer. He finds out that he was never actually divorced from his previous wife. Tommy leaves to become an instructor at Darwin Field, and Cynthia returns home to her aunt and uncle. Nils Knudsen telephones Tommy, and later, the two arrive at Cynthia's house late at night with Dorsey and a contingent of his orchestra, where they serenade the Glenn house, as well as the rest of the neighborhood. Tommy lip-syncs Knudsen's voice to a love song to Cynthia. Cynthia runs outside to Tommy, and the two share a kiss while Knudsen continues singing, leaving Nona and a bemused Hobart to wonder how Tommy can sing and kiss at the same time. Cast: Esther Williams as Cynthia Glenn, Van Johnson as Major Thomas Milvan, Carleton G.Young as Robert G. Delbar, Francis Gifford as Maud Bancroft, Henry Travers as Hobart Hobie Glenn, Spring Byington as Nona Glenn, Lauritz Melchior as Nils Knudsen, Jane Isbell as Giggling Girl, Ethel Griffiths as Mrs. Sarah Fenway, Donald Curtis as K.O. Carney, Jerry Scott as Lionel, Fernando Alvarado as Julio, Ellen Stanley as Susan Dorsey, Vince Barnett as Oscar the waiter, Billy House as Dr. Tove, Joan Famer Carboy as Betty, Tommy Dorsey as himself, Jeff Chandler as singer, the King Sisters as specialty act. Drummer Buddy Rich notably performs a short solo in one scene, as well playing with the Dorsey Orchestra in several others. 16-year-old Jerry Scott sings a beautiful rendition of Because. Production. It was Esther Williams' first film following her debut as a star in Bathing Beauty. MGM described the film as primarily a human comedy with musical trimmings. Johnson's casting was announced in March 1944. Robert Z. Leonard was meant to direct, but he fell ill, so Richard Thorpe took over. When attempting to create the right shade of blue from the swimming pool, the set decorator discovered that the paint he had used to color the cement had dissolved after adding the chlorine to the pool, creating a mess with the consistency of homogenized milk. The pool had to be drained and refilled. In her autobiography, Williams said that the studio attempted to put her and co-star Van Johnson together in public as much as possible, even though she was involved with future husband Ben Gage. When asked why they didn't date, Johnson replied, "Because I'm afraid she can't get her webbed feet into a pair of evening sandals." While filming, Williams and Thorpe rarely got along. After Williams forgot several lines during one take and the cast and crew began to leave for lunch, Williams notified Thorpe of her mistake. He called the entire crew back to the stage, saying, "Turn the lights back on, boys. This lady wants to act." Williams locked herself in her dressing room for the rest of the day. After that episode, Thorpe stopped picking on her. When filming the backstroke scenes in the swimming pool, Williams had to place her hand under Johnson's back to keep him afloat. The Office of War Information voiced concern that the film, set in an elegant resort, would pose problems with overseas distribution. A memo from the agency claimed that films boasting of American opulence would be resented by the Allies closer to the fighting front. Release. The film wrapped on October 1, 1944, and was released the following year. It was previewed in a small neighborhood outside of Los Angeles. Cards filled out by the audience were filled with comments such as, "Van is a darling," and "I love that boy. I love him more than Frankie." The film premiered at the Grauman's Egyptian Theater in Hollywood, with the proceeds going to the war wounded. Johnson was overcome by female fans upon his arrival and exit to the theater. Fans stole his handkerchief, boutonniere and buttons from his shirt. They also yanked his tie or his collar and ripped his red hair from his head, leaving his scalp bleeding. Critical response. A 1945 New York Times review of the film claimed that the minutes drag on here unthrillingly, and that, as for Miss Williams, she models a bathing suit handsomely and cuts a fine figure in the water. But right there her talent ends. A reviewer for the Los Angeles Times wrote, "Thrill of the romance is all bright colors, but the luster is only glaze deep. But its gaudiness will carry it through, especially with the fans." Quote, when the film opened at the Capitol Theater in Manhattan, the critic from the New York Herald-Tribune remarked that Johnson gave the type of performance that has endeared him to the younger set. He is the antithesis of the wolf. Clean-cut, amiable, a little shy, and needing aid and comfort. Box office. Thrill of the Romance was the 8th top-grossing film of 1945 in the US and Canada, earning $4,338,000. It also earned $2,682,000 in other countries, resulting in a profit of $3,259,000. Home media. On October 6, 2009, Turner Entertainment released Thrill of the Romance on DVD as part of the Esther Williams Spotlight Collection, Volume 2. The 6-disc set was a follow-up to the company's Esther Williams Spotlight Collection, Volume 1, and contains digitally remastered versions of several of Williams's films, including Fiesta, This Time for Keeps, Pagan Love Song, $1 Million Mermaid, and Easy to Love.